Back in the heady days of 2014, where grand worldwide events were taking place, like Gangnam Style hitting 2 million views on YouTube and Luis Suarez biting yet another footballer in the World Cup, the world of digital tabletop games was shaken to its core by the release of Blizzard's new collectible card battler, Hearthstone.
Hearthstone!
Whilst card games had existed in the digital medium for a long old time, dating back to the Yu-Gi-Oh card game RPGs on the original PlayStation and mini-games like Triple Triad and Final Fantasy VIII, this was the first time that a real standalone hit had garnered proper worldwide recognition and success. There's a massive portion of the video game industry and a newly regenerated TCG market in board games that owes part of its existence to the Hearthstone success. But with new mediums comes innovation and competition. New games appear, taking the bones of their predecessors and twisting them and turning them into new creations with innovative new ideas that can make the original games that they were based on seem even a little dull in comparison. So let's look at some of the absolute best digital card games out there, in our opinion, that aren't Hearthstone. Whilst Hearthstone's success spawned a lot of innovation, it also spawned a hell of a lot of clones too. Seeing a new opportunity to milk some money from their respective franchises, games companies throughout the world really rushed to make some of their own versions of the CCG hit and to try and snap up their share of the pack money. There's countless numbers of games out there that are Hearthstone but slightly different, including but not limited to Spellweaver, Animation Throwdown, The Quest for Cards, Forced Showdown, Shadover, Soulforge, Nova Blitz, Artifact, Gwent, Plants vs Zombies Heroes, The Elder Scrolls Legends, Faeria, Nova Blitz, Domain, the Trading Card Game, Dual Masters, Files, Cards, Nova Blitz, Artifact, Dual Masters, Domain, the Trading Card Game, Nova Blitz, Legends of Runeterra. Well, they've all made their attempts at toppling the giant, but none have come closer than the granddaddy of the physical world, Magic the Gathering Arena.
Looks like you've let your guard down.
Built from the rules and card pool of the world's most lucrative card game, designed by Richard Garfield, Arena is a like-for-like digital version of the trading card game that we all know, all wrapped in fancy graphics and voice acting with animated card effects, single-player campaigns, and oodles of content. It took Wizards of the Coast a few attempts to get a really solid digital version of their flagship card game into the public's hands, but in fairness, Arena is an incredibly well-polished and user-friendly way to play Magic the Gathering, to the point where if you want to learn how to play, you're actually better off just downloading Arena rather than grabbing a physical starter kit. And that's coming from a tabletop website, so I mean, it must be true, right?
Did you see that coming?
It makes sense that Arena would be the #1 contender for Hearthstone's binary cardboard throne. With decades of history in the game's fabric, before it even hit the internet, Magic already had an enormous fan base and plenty of experience in monetizing itself. With no price of entry and a massive community playing all the time, Magic is constantly flooded with new updates, including cards, new ways to play, and all sorts of events to take part in. If Hearthstone isn't your jam, why not take a seat with some of the old masters? What is the Spire? How long has it stood for, and how long will it continue to stand? What will you find when you venture inside? These are the quandaries that assail you when playing the video game Slay the Spire, an adventure and role-playing card game set in a mysterious vertically inclined structure called the Spire. Your goal is to make your way through the building's various rooms in a gauntlet that will surely test your mind, spirit, and possibly even body. Slay the Spire combines elements of card games such as the Arkham Horror LCG and Marvel Champions with the kind of RPG and roguelike mechanics that you'd find in other video games to create this rapid-fire experience where you get better with every failure you run into. The aforementioned Spire is one hell of a dangerous place, filled with cutthroat thieves, talented sorcerers, toxic slimes, and other even stranger foes, all of whom stand between you and the secrets that lie at its peak. Each level of the Spire contains a series of branching paths intersected by various rooms. These rooms could contain fortuitous encounters such as treasures or allies, or they could house less advantaged occupants such as the gang of cultists who happen to be ready to tear you limb from limb with all manner of terrible weapons. Luckily for you, there are 4 formidable heroes to choose from in Slay the Spire, with each one providing an entirely unique player experience. From the beginner-friendly Ironclad to the robotic Defect, each class offers its own diverse approach to the game that you'll do well to get your head around if you're going to make any progress. The fundamentals of the game are all fairly straightforward. You use energy to play cards that can attack, shield, or perform special skills, but learning how to utilize each class is the real meat and bones of Slay the Spire, and it's certainly not going to happen overnight because Slay the Spire is a game that's intended to be lost. You'll begin each playthrough with a deck of basic cards, which might get you through the first few rooms of like the first act, but you're going to need a lot more firepower if you want to get any further than that. Defeating certain enemies can earn you new cards and sometimes even the opportunity to improve or outright transform your existing cards. You can also find treasures and discover events that might help or possibly hinder your deck. There's even a merchant that you can visit, which may or may not be a band of identical people launching their own pop-up shops, who's willing to sell you new cards or destroy the old ones that you don't want in an effort to improve and streamline your deck. Despite these opportunities for strengthening your deck though, there are still enemies in the Spire who can turn you inside out. Trust me, one playthrough is unlikely to provide the strength that you'll need to survive all the dangers that Slay the Spire will throw your way, which is why death is kind of inevitable. But then again, death is arguably just another step on the path to victory. Whenever your character falls in battle, they'll unlock new cards to use in future runs, meaning that you're working with a better arsenal, a better pool of cards to choose from with each new playthrough. What's more is that you will hopefully learn from your past mistakes the more that you play. The knowledge that you've acquired from previous attempts will undoubtedly help you to overcome those obstacles that bested you last time. Soon enough, you'll be firing out powerful combos, cutting down enemies with ease, making the best of your energy supply in every turn. So the Spire is a game about momentum. Things are slow to start, but before you know it, your runs will be getting longer and longer, and eventually you'll be making it to the very top of the Spire, maybe even multiple times through with each of the playable characters, which is a perfectly viable way to approach the game, considering that the maps, stand enemies, and encounters for each act are randomly generated, meaning that no playthrough ever feels quite the same. So prepare your walking boots and summon more than a good ounce of courage, because you'll need it. You're about to slay the Spire. Modern digital card games have often tried to recreate Hearthstone's formula with 1 or 2 interesting changes to set themselves apart from the pack. Some games introduce multiple lanes or commanders as units, drawing from more than one deck, or even building your own deck as you play through each round. One thing that's sorely underutilized, in my humble opinion, is something that's been a staple of turn-based video games for decades, and that's grid-based tactical movement.
As much as our world changes, it always stays the same.
Most card games have your units sort of bring to the battlefield and just sort of exist in this abstract line, not really doing much of anything apart from attacking and defending. When card games are combined with a physical space, suddenly it's not just the cards that you play, but when and where you place them, how they move and attack, and how their position on the battlefield affects your overall strategy that comes into consideration. There's been a few card games that have given this a go with mixed results, including one of my favourite digital card games, Duelist, that was tragically shut down recently, so I couldn't make it on this list. The one I'm bringing up now, though, goes that one step further. Faeria has a lot of the visual DNA of Blizzard's monolithic card game, but as soon as you jump into a game, you'll notice something strange about the field in front of you. A big mess of hexagons places itself between you and your opponent, and the strange thing is that there's nothing filling them. That's because in Faeria, you're not only facing your opponents on a hex-based board, but you're also building the board yourself as you play. Each turn, you'll expand your territory with different tiles and cards, either making your way to attack your opponent or trying to take control of the magical wells that are dotted around the map. These wells are an important resource, and if you play smart, you can even starve your opponent of the points that they need to defend themselves before going in for the kill. Faeria is one of the most inventive of the player versus player card games out there that I've seen, and it's got a lot of smart ideas for introducing new players to its format as well, including the codex system. In Faeria, deck building is a lot more guided and user-friendly, but with all the depth and flexibility that players have come to expect from the genre, which balances the upper end of the spectrum, where super competitive users will be making their mad creations, and the newbies to the game are given a nice platform to experiment peacefully without being left with just a starter deck and the shirt on their back. Slay the Spire was a breakout indie success for the deck building genre, which combines a massively popular genre of tabletop games with a just as popular genre of video games in roguelikes. Well, it was only a matter of time then before it started to inspire some other developers to try out the formula. Enter Fights in Tight Spaces, the newest game on the list, a game that takes the core card mechanics, classes and branching paths of Slay the Spire and wraps them with a nice James Bond-esque bow. Our protagonist, Agent 11, is a modern martial artist in a tailored black suit who can choose from a variety of different fighting styles of each run. He can focus on aggressive, all-out attacks, he can be defensive with counter combos, or just balance and mix of the both, whatever the situation calls for. Just like Slay the Spire, you'll start with a standard deck of cards that will improve as you go through each room or tight space of your journey towards beating down the boss of a criminal organization. The thing that sets the two games apart, however, is something I was just praising about Faeria, in that Fitz pushes its card-driven combat into a real physical space made up of a square grid. Enemies will come at you from all angles, trying to surround your position and line up punch, kick, or even bullet to hit you. Your deck of standard attacks and defense numbers are accompanied by dodges, sprints, pushes, and pulls to maneuver yourself and your opponents to the best of your ability. There are even tactical spots in the map where you can instantly take down a foe by shoving them out of bounds, like you're fighting in some kind of Royal Rumble. This element of the game feels heavily inspired by the cult indie classic Into the Breach, whose tactical puzzle of tight movement and damage reduction is taken from its original theming of massive robots fighting huge bugs and swapped to a suave simulation of Casino Royale style punch-ups. Just like Into the Breach, everything that will happen when you press that end turn button is laid out for you plain as day. You can see the attacks your enemies are planning, the direction that they're going to punch, move and shoot in, and if you play your cards right, pun intended, you can manipulate that info to your advantage. Someone aiming at you with a gun? Drag their mate into the path of their shot and let them take the damage for you. Getting shoved by an enemy into a different space might be annoying, but not if they're going to do it just before you get smacked with an iron pipe. The visuals are really nice as well, by the way, reminiscent of time-stopping combat games Superhot or even party board game Dead Last, with stark white environments populated by monochromatic mischief makers trying to paint the white canvas with your bright red blood. After a particularly intricate fight, you can treat yourself to watching the whole thing play out in a real-time sequence by using the replay function and watch the chaos unfold in a piece of cathartic cinema. It's worth watching as well because your suit-clad kicker has some seriously cool animations to unleash on his enemies when you drop a tricky-to-use card. There was a short run of time where pretty much every third-person fighting video game had combat inspired by the Batman Arkham series. Hand of Fate is no different. It pits you against large numbers of enemies for you to weave between, unleashing sequential blow after blow as they mass around you, waiting to deliver a crucial hit. The key thing in this system is that whenever an enemy is about to attack, you'll get a prompt flash above their head telling you how you need to respond if you want to avoid the damage. A well-timed click can counter their blow and turn the damage on themselves, whilst other telegraphs might warn you of unblockable damage that you'll need to dodge out of the way of instead. Hand of Fate's combat isn't necessarily anything to write home about, but it's functional and fun. What we're more interested in though is the metagame that drags you from one combat encounter to the next. As you start up Hand of Fate, you're immediately introduced to your storytelling companion. Are they friend or foe? It's not immediately obvious, but he's certainly menacing. Face obscured and speaking in riddles, he invites you to play his cursed card game in the back of a dodgy carriage. Here's the interesting thing about Hand of Fate though, because whilst it might on the surface level share some DNA with other games on the list, procedurally generated dungeon crawls, roguelike elements, narrative events, deck building, it's actually the shadowy figure across the table who will be handling the cards themselves. Like a mystical fortune teller, your counterpart will lay cards across the table for you to move between, each holding different encounters for you to deal with. There might be tavern brawls or tests of strength, vendors to upgrade your equipment, or tricksy riddles to wrap your head around. It's reminiscent of a choose-your-own-adventure game or fighting fantasy books, with the shadowy figure accompanying you acting like a sort of games master, leading you from each encounter to the next. Hand of Fate is a card game, alright, but it's less so one that you're playing yourself, and more one that you're stuck inside of.
Everywhere the rot touches, and everywhere bears its stains.
Both of the games are full of different stories to play through, and which of the two games you pick will determine how those stories will play out. But the main draw is that whilst your opponent is building a deck of cards to try and whittle you down with, you'll be able to select your own set to shuffle into the deck as well. You can lay down pieces of equipment that you might find, people that you might meet, companions to fight at your side, enemies that you might encounter, or even troubles that you might have to deal with on your journey. Each card has its use, but there's only so many that you can choose, with the start of each session in Hand of Fate seeing you build your own deck of things that you want to do that will allow you to build your character as well as you can before you face off against the fortune teller's boss. Imagine building your Hearthstone deck, but instead of just shoving creatures and spells inside, you're filling it with miniature RPG adventures for you to encounter in random order.
Games within games within games.
Hand of Fate is a really intriguing way to play with the card game concept, and there's hours of play to get through as missions will set themselves up differently every time, with you unlocking new cards to play with, and even cards you're familiar with changing and evolving as you come across them multiple times. It's definitely the strangest card game on the list because it's mainly a combat game, but I think it's definitely worth trying out if you're interested.
You must harness your will and find the quiet stillness inside you.
Well, there you have it. All 5 of these games on this list are surefire ways to get you into the digital end of the card game world and have you smiling ear to ear as you set up the perfect combo or build the ultimate synergy in your decks, whether it's against human components or a web of intricate dungeons. But there's plenty more card games just like this out there, so why not tell us some of your favorites in the comments below? And whilst you're here, have you subscribed to Dicebreaker yet? We post all sorts of videos just like this one here on youtube.com/Dicebreaker, and you get notified every time we put a new one live by clicking on the bell icon as well. Make sure to check out our home and hearth at Dicebreaker.com as well, which is chock full of great game recommendations and some stellar writing on all things tabletop. You can even grab some custom DB merch from Dicebreaker.myshopify.com as well. Anyways, thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you at least enjoyed one of these games on this list. I'll see you on the next one, but until then, have a lovely day.